Hey, it's Mike, and I just wanted to let you guys know I get a ton of questions about what kind of kettlebell I should buy when we're talking about things like brands and different sort of competition style bells. So I brought out some of the bells that we have here at Tough Temple, and I just wanted to show you some of the differences between each one and give you a few recommendations. So stay tuned and we'll see how all of these bells add up and what should be in your collection. So if we're talking about things you should not buy, and where I get a lot of people calling me, is this sort of stuff. These little plastic or rubber bells that you get at Target, bells with chromed handles. Definitely not going to recommend any of those for anybody. Big reason for it, they're junk. I have no easier way of putting it. They're just junk. The outside cracks, the seams in the plastic will tear your hands up. They don't turn over well. The shape of them is a little bit off. They're cheap, but I would definitely not recommend buying these at all. So if you've got those, just get them off your rack. Give them to Goodwill, use them as door stops. Not my favorite. So let's go ahead and turn to what you're going to see in a typical gym, or what you're going to frequently find at some place like a kettlebell club or a CrossFit or a commercial gym. And what you're going to see in most of those is going to be cast iron bells. This particular one is an 8-kilo Rogue. Every one of these bells is 8 kilos. They all weigh exactly the same, but this is an 8-kilo Rogue cast bell. Now, some of the pluses of cast bells, you notice they're very compact. The downsides of cast bells, also another plus is they're relatively inexpensive. Downside of cast bells, these handles are going to be varying shapes and sizes, so this window is going to change however you go through these weights. So the difference between an 8 and say a 12 or a 24-kilo bell could be fairly substantial. These bells could be dramatically different. It's going to affect your technique. For some lifters, these are not real comfortable, right? So as they sit in the rack, this sits right on your wrist bones. It's a real uncomfortable bell. And as far as for overall form, it doesn't really flow very well, right? It's too small to get up into that bell well for a snatch. They're just a pain in the butt to deal with because, just to me, the weighting and the distribution is just a little off. I'm also not a big fan of the E-coating. The handles are coated. You notice these are pitted. They're pretty rough on your hands. Moving into some better bells and moving into competition bells in particular. I'm going to start over here on the end and then we'll work our way towards. Over here to the right is a Kettlebell Kings 8-kilo. We've had this bell in the club for about 3 or 4 years now. Gets pretty much daily use, and you can see it's showing a little bit of patina. That's pretty typical of a competition bell. What I do like about the Kettlebell Kings bells is that it's a standard 35mm handle. You're going to find that in most of the competition bells. The weight is nice. The window is fairly consistent. You'll notice that these first 3 bells are all Chinese bells, and you'll notice that they are pretty much the same because in general, there's only a couple factories that make them, and they just slap different logos and paint jobs on them. With the Kettlebell Kings bell, it is going to be the hollow bottom bell, which basically means that the drop cast is done in a way where all the weight's up top here between the handles, and the bell is hollow to make weight. What you're going to find is that it takes chalk very well. It feels pretty good in your hand. It will rest in rack very comfortably. When you bring it overhead, it turns over consistently. It is a good quality bell. You're typically going to be looking at this as a mid-price to higher-end bell. King's bells are pretty good quality bells. They are having some supply chain issues right now, but in general, it's a good bell. It's kind of a mainstay bell. Moving into one of our newer bells here, this is a Bells of Steel competition bell. You notice the similarities with the Kettlebell Kings bell are very similar. You will notice there are some slight differences right here on the horns, but in general, it's also a good quality bell. When these come from the factory, these handles on both of these bells are going to be really slick, so you're going to want to take a wire brush or a sand block to them, get a little bit of texture to them, otherwise they're not going to hold chalk well. This turns over about the same as the Kings bell. As best I can tell, they're almost identical. They probably came from the same foundry, but I can't really be sure. Moving down in price is that Bells of Steel. So these are going to be less expensive than the King's Bell for what I consider to be about the same. Long-term tests is the King's Bells have held up well. You can see the paint, however, is beat to hell. That's totally normal. But overall, I'd say these are pretty much identical bells. It's just the Bells of Steels I think is a better deal. Moving down the line, you're going to find a Vulcan bell. The Vulcan bell, I think, probably comes out of a different place, a little bit different here. The handle comes pre-textured. I actually kind of like it. So while you probably can't pick it up as well in the video, this texture feels really good in your hand, hold chalk really well. It also has a different kind of coating. This looks like an E-coating versus a sprayed-on paint. This is about 2 years in the club, and it's showing almost no wear, getting the same amount of use as the King's bell. So it's actually a pretty tough bell. These are about half the price of the King's bells. You're going to find that it's a good bell. It is probably the best bargain out there. Turnover on it is good. So you get a good hand insertion easily. And for snatch, it punches through pretty nicely. Feels good in your hand. So I will find that in general, I would recommend the Vulcan's bell. If you are building out a home gym or you need an inexpensive bell, great choice. As we move down the line, we start getting into a more expensive or more premium bell. And this is where we get into Pro Kettlebell. Pro Kettlebell has only been in the industry a couple of years. They are based out of the Pacific Northwest, and it is a 100% American-made kettlebell. It is a phenomenal bell. You will notice that the design is a bit different. It's got these nice grooves right here for your forearms on it, compared to a conventional round bell. These are similar to the Old World Kettlebell Club bells, but they are a little bit different in that they've got this sort of diamond or guitar pick in the center. Love them or hate them. Very polarizing feature that I've seen with a lot of my lifters. I tend to like them because when you've got a lifter, if they're in the wrong position, they'll feel it immediately. It's a good training aid. What I don't like is that when you have a new lifter, that thing pokes the living hell out of them, and they tend to not like it. It will polarize certain lifters. I tend to like them, but you will have some pushback from lifters, and it does present certain challenges. Within Pro, the other thing is different. This window shape, you'll notice, is different. It's a little bit smaller. It's also a little bit faster. Now, you will also notice, and I can't tell if you can see it on the video, that the handle is oblong, which means it's about 33.5, 34 mils this way, and a full 35 this direction. So it is slightly oblong. And they also keep some texture on the sides of their handles, but not on the tops and the undersides. So I tend to really like that feature because you can take chalk really well on the bells, but you also can get away with using them with no chalk whatsoever. Pro comes in 2 sizes. You'll notice that this is their smaller size, the Atlas. This is the larger size, the Apollo. The Apollo is on par with the regular competition bells and is accepted by most of the federations that are out there. Atlas, maybe not. Where I like the Atlas is with some of my lifters. This stops up at 24 kilos, but that's okay. This will look a little bit more familiar in size to a cast bell. So if you've got somebody transitioning from cast iron bells in either a local commercial gym or a CrossFit environment, this is going to be a really good choice. One other thing is this bell turns over very fast on snatches. So turnover on this is very quick, which brings me down to another feature. The Pros all have a hole right here in the bottom. They make a 2 kilo and a 1 kilo magnet that goes in there. So if you're halfway between bell sizes, say 8 kilos, but you're not quite ready to go for a 12, you can throw 2 kilos in there and you can go with a 10. You can throw 1 kilo in there and go with a 9. So I do like that a lot. These Pros have been on the shelf here and in daily use here in the club for about a year. You'll notice that they do have a little bit of patina on them, bit at the contact spots, a little bit of sweat marks, but in general, the clear acrylic that they're using on these is extremely tough and does far better than the King's bells. So again, when we're looking at bells, you've got choices out there. If I'm going ahead and setting up a home gym, my go-to is probably going to be the Vulcan or the Bells of Steel. If I'm setting up in more of a commercial environment and I've got the money, very much likely going to be these Pros, although you can't go wrong with any of the other ones in there. What I'm probably not going to do in any place where we're doing sport lifting is a cast bell. That's all I've got right now. Please go ahead and post up your questions or comments, send up any reviews, tell me I'm crazy, love to hear from you. Thanks so much. If you're here in DC, stop by Tough Temple. We would love to see you. Come try out our bells.